Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host for today. We are talking UFC Kansas City, headlined by Machado Garry and Carlos Prates. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. And listen, we are coming off a fantastic card at UFC 314, went 5-0 on our client plays, cashing in nearly 12 units of profit, and absolutely fantastic card. But we got to lock in because we've got 10 straight UFC events incoming, a lot of great opportunities to put our money in strong position. So we got to lock and load for the next few weeks. And if you want to become a client, link down in the description. Already have 3 plays in there for clients, including a 5% max bet. Last week's max bet was on Alexander Volkanovski at -115, crushed that closing line value, and we are going to consistently do that here on the show. So if you want to become a client, link down there. And with that being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Machado Garry and Carlos Prates. Now, this is really going to be a fight between a minute winner and a moment winner here, where you've got Machado Garry, who is a high-level kickboxer, a guy who's going to really push a pace and doesn't really have the power, but can really have a death by accumulation and really just to look to outland his opponents. Where Prates on the other side here, another high-level kickboxer, but this guy definitely brings a lot more power to the table and doesn't really push that type of pace. Now, he does have 21 victories in his career in Carlos Prates, 16 by knockout, 3 by submission. You've got Machado Garry, 15 wins, 7 by knockout, and 1 by submission. But most of them, more recently, he has been looking to point fight and find success that way. Now, one of the biggest issues that I saw really with Carlos Prates is the fact he's very low volume. And I think this is going to be a massive concern for anybody that's looking to back Prates in this fight here, is because, he does have the power. He does have the skill set. There are all those things that Prates has, but there are just times he just doesn't let his hands go. And I think one of the big ones that we did see was against Trevin Giles. Giles is kind of a journeyman type of fighter. He does have some ability, but just not really that high level type of fighter. But in that first round against Prates, he really dominated. He outlanded him, set up the jab, nice 1-2 combinations, really mixed it up, and kind of just really had Prates confused. And I thought that was a very interesting round for him. Even going into that second round, you still saw Giles find some success up until Prates does what Prates does. He finds the big shot, gets that finish. But even with that being said, Trevin Giles outlanded him 68-37. And now you're about to face, Machado Garry, a high-level kickboxer who offers up more volume, offers up more weapons. I think it's a cause for concern on the Prates side. Plus, even against the leech Mingyang, who's a 37-year-old fighter who was at the end of his career. But even there, it was a competitive, as in landing. I think it was like, in the 40s, 43 or something like that, Li Jingliang landed, and Prates landed like 50-something. But still, Prates finds the harder hits, has the bigger moments, and does get the victory. But Machado on the other side here, he is just very defensively sound. He is, has good footwork. He's very risk adverse, and he's very tricky. And I think that's really where he's going to also cause problems for Prates, is that he's not going to stand there and bang and throw. He's going to mix it up a little bit, and he's going to steer clear of a lot of that danger. And you've got Machado, who absorbs less than 3 significant strikes per minute, while Prates absorbs nearly 5 significant strikes per minute and does have a negative striking differential. And I think that really says a lot about really where the opportunities for Garry are, to just have that volume and just look to outland him and steer clear of that danger. And then the other part here is Prates is looking for those pocket exchanges. He's looking for those big moments, but that's the thing about Garry. He's going to stick and move. He's going to look to land some shots, change angles, stance switch, throw the 1-2 combination again, look to mix it up. And I think that is just, again, the volume will be there. Plus, I do like that Garry is going to look to chop away at that front leg. I think he's going to mix those in very nicely here. And also just, again, keep Prates off balance. And you also have that if there is anyone that's looking for a takedown, it's probably going to be Garry looking for takedowns and looking to mix that up. We know what kind of camp he comes from. That is something in his tool belt that he can look to get those takedowns and just mix it up, change of pace. And that, again, for a low volume striker in Prates, all of those things coming at him, I think, can be a little bit overwhelming for him. And he's going to have to land the big shot, because I don't think he has the ability to win rounds outside of a big moment. And then lastly is going to be the cardio. It's hard to quantify what smoking 15 cigarettes does per day for Prates. That's what he claims, but it can't be good. And I just think that there is an issue there where maybe that's why, Prates is not this high volume strikers, because maybe he can't fuel just high volume output. And again, this is going to be a 5-rounder, his first 5-rounder. I think that that's where, again, if this fight has legs, get deeper. I think that's what Ian Garry is looking to kind of do, take this fight a little bit deeper, point fight for as long as he can. And I think that's what he does. And again, the better strength of schedule also goes with Machado Garry here. So I got to go Ian Machado Garry at -125 in the main event, and I believe he gets the job done. Next one we're going to talk about is going to be Mingyang Zhang -520 against Anthony Smith +390. Now, this absolutely feels like a squash spot for Zhang. And, really the big red flag here is the fact that this is the retirement fight for Anthony Smith. He's pretty much always had, one foot out the door over the last couple of years. And, the decline is there. He's 36 years old. He's probably 56 when you're talking about MMA age, and the damage he has taken and all of the fights he has taken over his career. And I think the decline is here. It's clear. And I think on the flip side, there's no doubt that the UFC wants to build up Zhang at this particular point. He's from China. That's a massive market. It's a huge viewership, and he's 26 years old. They only want to get this kid a little bit more into the spotlight. Plus, the fact is, he's pretty impressive when you're looking at it because he's getting finishes. He had a 100% finish rate, 18 victories, 12 by knockout, 6 by submission. But even the more impressive part is the fact that all of those came in the first round. So he does not waste time. He goes out there and can get the job done. And you look at, Smith, he's just a guy that doesn't absorb shots very well at this particular point. He doesn't have the firepower to even stand and throw with Zhang. And I think Zhang can comfortably move forward, throw big shots, have that power advantage, and really look to land the kill shot. And plus Smith, who in his career, he's 37-21 as a pro. A lot of fights under his belt there and a lot of losses. And out of those 21 losses, 11 were by knockout. I think the durability is definitely on the downturn completely. He doesn't have the footwork, I think, to kind of steer clear of any of the big shots coming his way as Zhang is marching forward. And I think that Smith really needs, takedowns. I think he has to get takedowns in order to find any type of success here, to mix it in, look for takedowns. And it's one, Zhang is no slouch on the ground. The guy definitely has grappling ability, but also the fact that, Smith that's just not historically what he has done, looking for takedowns and just, diving at legs. He averages less than half a takedown per 15 minutes. So this is definitely something he's not looking to do. With that being said, then I think this fight plays out on the feet. I think the bigger shots are absolutely coming from Zhang. I think Smith is probably going to be willing enough to probably stay in the pocket. I don't think he can absorb this type of damage. And you're looking at Zhang here at -520. You can get Zhang inside the first 2 rounds by knockout at -150. I think that is a pretty solid price overall. Now, obviously, we just said all of, Zhang's wins come in the first round. But I like getting that extra round just in case. But I do think that the first 2 rounds, a knockout is extremely live. And I think that that's what happens. Probably a brutal knockout against Anthony Smith. So we're going Mingyang Zhang inside the first 2 rounds by knockout. And the next one we're going to talk about is going to be Randy Brown versus Nicolas Dalby. We've got Brown -235. In the comeback here, we've got Nicolas Dalby +195. Now, I think the biggest reason here why Brown is the favorite is because Dalby is now 40 years old. And you also have the fact that Brown, 4-inch reach advantage. He's going to be the better striker, probably the better footwork, very rangy, light on his feet, good distance management. Now, I've said all of those great things about him, but I do think that Dalby, the style at which Dalby fights, is going to cause Brown problems. Now, I think that Brown, he's going to want range. He's going to want space. He's going to want to utilize all of those tools that he does have. He's long. He's lanky. There are opportunities for him to do that, to just stay on the outside. But Dalby's a guy who has not been finished in his career. He's a guy that's going to move forward, who does have durability. And I think he's going to be, keep Brown very uncomfortable with the pressure. with pushing forward, with looking to just get his hands on him. And you've got Dalby, who, is just an absolute dog in there. I mean, the guy is just, he has that weird breathing technique that he does, but he can weaponize that cardio. He can melt guys. He can just kind of stay on them. And that's where I really think that he can do that. Continuous forward movement is going to be very tough for Randy Brown overall. And I think Brown is going to start to really get frustrated where he's on the back foot for a lot of the fight. He can't find his range, can't find his ability to kind of get his offense going. And I think that's where you're going to see Dalby, who crashes the pocket, gets his hands on him. And that's where I think he's going to be able to muscle Brown around. And even up against the fence, I think he's going to cage push him up against the fence, dirty boxing, look to maybe drag Brown down, and Brown may get back up, and then he's going to look to drag him back down, cage push him, and just a rinse and repeat. And I don't think it's going to be some spectacular finish by Dalby, but I do think that positionally he can win, and he can consistently do that over 3 rounds. And we basically just saw that where Randy Brown just fought Brian Battle. And Battle, early in the fight, Brown was landing some shots, and then Battle said, I'm just going to push you up against the fence, keep you there, positionally win, hold you there, and bank rounds. And I think the blueprint is there. I think Dalby can maybe even do that a little bit better, just because he's got, I think, that cardio and just the consistency of that durability. So to me, in this spot here, I think that this is a very wide line. I think Randy Brown is the rightful favorite, but I would say in that, minus 130 range, probably minus 140 range. But when you're looking at this wide of a line, you got to go the dog here. I think Nicolas Dalby is absolutely live, and we're taking Nicolas Dalby at plus 195. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be Robert Romero, minus 125 against Timothy Cuamba, plus 102. Now, these are 2 prospects that are coming off losses in the UFC. You've got Cuamba, who recently just got beat up against Lucas Almeida. He got dropped. He got rocked multiple times, ended up losing. And then you've got Robert Romero, who, he comes in up against David Onama in a fight where it was like days notice. And, Romero goes out there and, drops Onama in that first round, hurt him. And, yes, he wasn't able to get the victory, but I thought he had a pretty good account of himself throughout that fight. Started to gas later, but still, I thought in the circumstances there was a pretty good performance. Now, I think the red flag on the Cuamba side is that he doesn't really deal with pressure well. This is another guy that just doesn't like pressure, wants space. He's going to be the more technical striker. He's going to have some of those abilities. He's going to have decent hand speed, some good boxing, but he's a guy that will prefer to circle on the outside, be at range, not really allow any big exchanges to happen. He's kind of like a good hammer, but he's a terrible nail. He's a guy that, if things aren't going his way, he does not like it. He just doesn't have the will to really kind of push forward and push through that. And now he's about to face, Romero, who is a very aggressive fighter, who's going to really push forward, look to land big shots, be absolutely aggressive, march forward. And that, I think, is going to really cause a lot of problems for Cuamba, who's, not going to want these pocket exchanges, who's not going to want to, be in the middle there. And I think that is going to be where he can, Romero can control the action, control the center of the cage, look to force the brawl, look to push and have the bigger moments. And that's really where, if he doesn't get the finish, I think optically to the judges, he's going to be the one that's moving forward. You've got Cuamba who's going to be the one backing up on the back, on the back foot. You got Romero who's going to be, controlling the center of the cage, having these moments. And I think that's really where Roberto Romero is going to have a lot of success in this spot here. And I think the more impactful shots are going to be by him as well, too. So I still think this is a pretty solid line overall, just at minus 125. So I'm going Roberto Romero minus 125 to get the job done. There you have it for my plays for UFC Kansas City. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Already have a 5% max bet up right now. We are 16-5 on those over the last 12 months. I am the #1 MMA capper at Wager Talk over the last 12 months as well, too. So we got a lot of good things going on here. 10 straight UFC events incoming, and we're going to cash this weekend. We're going to cash next weekend, and we're going to just keep cashing. So with that being said, let's cash.